Hey everyone, just a quick update before the video begins. Because I'm heading to the Canadian Grand Prix this weekend, I wasn't able to do a lot of uploading and a lot of voiceover for the videos this week. Just way too much booking of tickets, getting the itinerary set up, so it was a little bit too busy. I do have a backlog of videos, so I'm going to hope to have a number of releases coming out in the week after the Grand Prix, and I'll probably do some reviews, stuff like that, and some more of the normal content where we're just having fun online or in a career mode and talking about stuff. So I just wanted to make you aware the videos won't be that scarce going forward, but with that being said, here's the video. Hello and welcome everybody to my race preview for Canada. And the Canadian Grand Prix this year is actually one which I'll be attending, which is exciting. And I'm going to do a little bit of a preview prediction video for it, just talking about what I hope to see, sort of some of the general talking points, and maybe get into a couple of the rumors that came out this week, but we probably won't deep dive too much into that. So I'll start off with Mercedes. Incredibly ominous. It's tough to think that they're going to be beaten at this point with the pace that they put up. Red Bull did a great job closing a bit of the ground in Monaco, which is a very tough track. So there is some promise there and some hope from Red Bull that maybe in Hungary, Singapore, some of the more downforce and handling focused tracks that they might be able to claw back some points from Mercedes. The last race, to be honest, I thought was going to be the first race that Mercedes experienced one retirement. And because it didn't happen, I'm going to go ahead and say I think that the Canadian Grand Prix will feature our first Mercedes retirement. I don't know if it'll be mechanical failure of some kind or maybe just a incident, but I do think that the luck has to run out at some point. I do think that the remaining Mercedes will win the race. If I were going to make a prediction right now, I would say Hamilton retires with an engine failure, Bottas wins the race, with Leclerc and Vettel as the next two. And maybe I'm getting my hopes up a little bit too much for Ferrari, maybe I'm hoping for a little too much from them, but I do think that barring any incidents, barring any mechanical failures, that Mercedes does have the pace here for a 1-2, and you kind of have to hope for one of the cars to retire to break that up. So next I'll move on to Ferrari. Hopefully they have two cars finish and hopefully they're able to pull out a strategy here. It's a race that can feature some weather, it can feature some wildlife. It has a lot of things that can throw up a wild card, and it never seems to give you the same race twice. So it is interesting to think that maybe if the weather hits properly at the right time, if there's a tire or strategy call by Mercedes that doesn't quite work, that maybe Ferrari can step in there and get their first race win of the season. But with everything being as it has been with the strategy calls, I just don't see that happening at this point. I think Ferrari has a lot to figure out. I think they've got two phenomenal drivers. I just think making those drivers work well together and making the team work properly are two massive issues for them right now. The next team that I will touch on is actually Williams, and there was recently a video from Autosport talking about how Williams can finally see a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, how some of the problems with the car have been realized and they're able to start working towards a bigger fix. And it has been just the worst possible start for them, missing half of the testing before the season and then rolling into the season 3 seconds off the pace, and the incidents in Azerbaijan with George Russell and the drain and the burying of the car at the castle section by Kubica. It's just been extremely difficult for them, and they're a team that I really like to cheer for. They're the last independent creator. They're the last ones really doing it like teams used to, where it was just a bunch of guys having fun, showing up to the track to race. And that's the racing that I come from in my background. For those of you that don't know, I worked in the pits for a race team for a number of years. Really grassroots stuff, nothing insane, but just the joy of showing up to a weekend, a whole bunch of grassroots guys all showing up with their trailer with their car on it, open top trailer, like a rack of tires on the top, you know, everybody barbecuing together after the race. That's the kind of stuff that I like, and that's what F1 used to be. There were your manufacturers, of course, and it's always been one of the more luxurious forms of racing, for sure. No doubt about that, but there used to be a bit of that grassroots style in there, and teams like Williams could show up and compete even though they didn't have a Ferrari badge, or maybe they weren't backed by Ford. It's a team you want to cheer for. They're doing it the old-fashioned way. And I know they won't in Canada, but I think Canada could be the first in a stepping stone towards perhaps getting a little closer. Do I think that they're going to score a bunch of points at the end of the season? No. I think they may score one or two, depending if there's a crazy race, if something gets thrown up, or if they actually manage to make back a certain amount of their pace. I mean, I think it's totally not out of the question. So my hope for Williams this race is that they'll be maybe a second and a half off the pace. I think that's realistic. Hopefully it shows they're working in the right direction. If it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world, but we'll touch on Williams again here in a minute with one of these wild rumors that have come about. And the last team that I'm going to focus on, which is actually going to be my team to watch for the weekend, is McLaren. I think that Norris and Sainz have done an incredible job this year. I think they have some great pace. I think Norris is going to be up around the point where he can maybe knock off Gasly for that 6th spot here. I think that Gasly's done as best he can. I think he's getting a lot of heat. I like the guy. I think he's a good driver. I just don't think he's got that pace in that Red Bull yet. I don't think he's 100% comfortable. And I think that Norris has a good chance of grabbing that 6th spot and maybe getting some good points for Renault. And I see them having a double points finish this weekend. So might be a bold prediction, maybe not. We'll see how that plays out. So on now to the wild and crazy rumor mill. And I'm going to fire through these pretty quickly. I think they're mostly unfounded, except for maybe the Williams one might be an option. I'm not sure. The first one, this one was touched on by the F1 Word and by numerous publications over the week, that Vettel was thinking about retirement. He came out recently, said that he's not, and I don't think he will. I don't think that was ever in the cards. I don't know if he'll finish out next year with Ferrari. I think he's still got a couple years left in him, whether they're at Ferrari or somewhere else. Not entirely sure yet, but I do think that there's a lot left in the guy. I think he's a little bit beaten down by Ferrari, and I can't blame him for that. It's a tough operation to be a part of, especially for how long he's been a part of it, and not having the championship wins. Ferrari and their fans are very championship oriented. The second rumor of the week was a Hülkenberg to Red Bull to replace Gasly. I think that that's a ridiculous statement. Hülkenberg, while he's a great driver, is one of the most difficult drivers on the grid to have signed to your team because of his height and his weight. He is, for an F1 driver, quite large, and you have to design a custom monocoque around that driver because of his height. I think he's like 6'3", I think, maybe 6'2". That's not massive. I mean, in hockey, there's people who are 6'9", in basketball, people are upwards of 7 feet. But when you're in a sport that's so precise and so engineering oriented, so technically oriented, even a little bit of height can change the entire monocoque shape for the driver, which makes it extremely difficult for the team. And at a time when they're already redesigning the Red Bull to fit that Honda engine and trying to integrate those two seamlessly, I don't see them wanting to redesign a whole new car for a Hülkenberg. The other issue being his height leads to an increased weight. And as per Eric Boulier, each additional 10 kilograms is the equivalent of about 0.3 of a second in lap pace averaged out over the course of a season. It increases the difficulty for the designers, it increases the weight of the car, and then you have the added factor that Gasly, Verstappen, Albon, Kvyat are all young drivers, they're all very talented drivers. If Gasly loses his seat at this point, I would be upset. As I said before, I think he's talented. I don't think he deserves a lot of the heat he's getting. But then you have an Albon who's done nothing but impress everybody. Kvyat, who's had an incredible return after what a lot of people think was an unfair sacking at Red Bull and then again at Toro Rosso in 2017. So he's come on just amazingly this year. And then you have a Verstappen. I think that they're pretty set. I look at them like a rebuilding sports team that has a lot of young talent. Whatever direction they go with that young talent is up to them, but I would invest in that young talent, whether in 10 years you have all four of them or not. At least use them to make the team better, bring them up the right way, don't jump to conclusions, and I think that they'll be fine in the long run. Our next rumor in the mill is the Leclerc frustrated with Ferrari rumor. Again, this one was brought to my attention through the F1 word. Great group of guys. I think it's completely ridiculous. I think if nothing else, Leclerc has proven his maturity, and I think that he's young, and when you're young you can tend to be a little bit angry, you can be a little bit short-sighted. All of that comes down to immaturity. I don't see Leclerc as that type of guy. I don't see him as an immature person. I don't see him as an easily frustrated person. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders, and I think that if he were to throw a tantrum at this point and leave Ferrari, it would change a lot of the public opinion of him and his mentality towards racing. I think this is an opportunity he's wanted his whole life. Has Ferrari lived up to his expectations? Probably not with what's gone on there, but I don't think that you can take 6 races and just apply that to what could be a long and illustrious career with a great racing team. So I don't think that there's any truth in that. I think, is he frustrated? Probably. Who wouldn't be at this point with what's gone on there? And you could see the frustration in Monaco. It was plain to see. He drove that car to the point of destruction with 3 wheels, bringing it back to the pits, and that was out of nothing but frustration and anger. And that's a little bit of that young driver that you see. Similar to Max Verstappen last year, where everybody goes, why is he pulling those moves? Why is he making that? There's no way you'll ever make that. Why would you do something like that? And the team came out and said, you know, he is young. He is still a younger driver, and he will make those mistakes, and that's true. And then look at how much he has changed to the start of this year, where Max looks way more mature and way more in control and calculated, and a lot like Sebastian Vettel looked when he finally started winning his championships, and how Lewis looks all the time. And I think there was an interesting moment that I want to do a brief aside to last year, where Ocon and Verstappen came together in Brazil, and after the race, Lewis kind of took Max aside and he gave him a little bit of a, I would say it would be words of encouragement or a quick lesson, and just said, look man, you have everything to lose in that race. You were in first place, you had the pace to win, and Ocon has nothing to lose, and you threw it away over something that you didn't necessarily have to. And I'm obviously paraphrasing, it's not an exact quote, but I remember seeing that on TV afterwards, and for a guy like Max, that's an unbelievable lesson from a guy who's probably going to go on now to challenge to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest, F1 driver of all time statistically. And I think that he really must have heeded those words and taken that to heart. And there is a lot of vitriol against Hamilton in the sport, and he does have a bit of that attitude where he can be easy to hate for some people. I personally don't mind the guy, but I think Max easily could have scoffed at that and gone, whatever buddy, you know, but I do think he took that to heart, and he's really shown that step in maturity, and I think that's to come for Leclerc. He's already a mature guy, but there's always room for improvement with these things, and it is the toughest team in F1. There's a lot of intricacies there, the best league in the world for racing, but I would see a move out of Ferrari at this point as a move made out of frustration and anger, as opposed to clear-headedness and with a keen eye on the future. So I don't think there's any foundedness in that. Is he frustrated? Probably. Who wouldn't be? But I don't think that he's frustrated enough at this point to throw away what is not only a lifelong dream of his, but of his godfather as well. And you can really feel that he is doing this for his godfather, at least helping maybe Jules live vicariously through him to experience what Jules always should have done. And the last rumor that we'll wrap up on is a Latifi to replace Kubica, and here comes Williams again. Do I think that this is founded? Perhaps. I think Latifi's a decent driver. He did a lot of FP1 sessions last year, and I'd love to see another Canadian on the grid, especially when the only Canadian is Lance Stroll. Thing against Stroll, but it's not the guy that I would want representing Canada on the world stage. And I think that could be a good thing. It'd be tough for Kubica. He's a likable guy. He's got an incredible backstory. I think he's struggling a little bit, and I don't think that he has much of a future in F1. I think Latifi does have more of a future, and Latifi, I think, has some Mercedes ties. I know he was practicing with Force India a lot last year, and with that link to Williams, perhaps there's a Mercedes link there. but I could see maybe something of a mid-season or late-season change, at least giving maybe Latifi a couple races, kind of like a Giovinazzi situation where they give him one or two, see what he does, and maybe hope for the best. I would think that it'd be sad to see Kubica go again, but unfortunately, I just don't think that he's at the level that he needs to be. The only thing that I would say that throws that plan off a little bit would be the amount of sponsorship money that a guy like Kubica brings in for a team like Williams. If he's bringing in a sizable portion, I think he brought in the Rocket, however it's pronounced, sponsorship, and I think that he has another large sponsorship maybe, but if it's a sizable amount of money, I don't see them wanting to throw that away unless Latifi can bring something big to the table in his own right. So just to close out the video here now, I'm going to do a quick couple predictions for you. I think that the podium, as I said before, will be a Bottas, and then I'll go Leclerc and then Vettel with Max Verstappen in fourth. I think the fastest lap will go to Max Verstappen. I think that there'll be a spread between the Ferraris and the Red Bull, and then Max and the rest of the pack. So I think he'll have time to come in this time and do that fastest lap. I think that there will be 3 retirements, 1 safety car, and based on the weather here recently, it does say it's going to be sunny, but there's always a chance, especially with the St. Lawrence Seaway there, that some weather might come in. And I do predict either a weather or a wild animal event causing some kind of disturbance in the race. So we'll see if that comes true or not, but we'll hope for the best in the race. And I'll probably try to capture some recording while I'm there, just some video. I don't have any fancy cameras with a tripod or anything like that, so it'll be pretty basic video, and I'll try to get some reaction up afterwards. So that's where we'll leave it for today. Thank you all for tuning in. It was great talking to you, and I'll probably see you after the race weekend unless I can get something up tomorrow. We'll see. I doubt I'll be able to upload over the weekend, even though I would be open to trying if I can, but we'll see how that goes. Everyone have a great day, and goodbye.